Fly home. Don't say anything to your mother and brother. That text hit my screen at 6:47 a.m. while I sat on a sunlit balcony in Aspen. I was watching my mother, Jennifer, laugh for the first time in 19 years at something my brother, Tyler, said. They looked like a normal family. They looked like people who finally wanted me back. An unknown number, no name. Just 7 words that turned the warm mountain air into a wall of ice. 12 hours later, I was standing in the arrivals hall of a small airport in Montana. A man in a gray suit held a sign with my name. Next to him were 2 police officers. What they showed me in that conference room changed the math of my life forever. I don't remember hitting the floor. I just remember waking up to fluorescent lights and a paramedic asking me to count backward from 10. Welcome to Turning Tables Stories. As I sit here with my coffee, watching the world drift by, quiet moments like this make me realize how unpredictable life is. Where are you watching from? And what is your favorite drink or time of day right now? I truly look forward to your comments. But first, let's go back to the truth waiting behind those doors. I didn't call them. I didn't storm into their suite and demand to know why a stranger was telling me to run for my life. That's what the old Madison would have done, the girl who was still desperate for a scrap of honesty. But the woman I had become knew better. In business, when a deal smells like rot, you don't stay to negotiate. You cut your losses and you leave. I packed my bags in under 7 minutes. The resort room smelled like expensive hibiscus, and the lingering scent of my mother's perfume, a fragrance that used to mean safety but now felt like a warning label. I moved with the precision of an auditor. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just opened my laptop, booked a one-way ticket, and requested a silent checkout. My heart was a drum in my chest, but my hands were steady. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. As the wheels of the plane left the runway in Colorado, I stared at the dark expanse of the Rockies. I kept wondering how I had let myself be tricked again. I was 29 years old. I had built an agricultural app valued at $94 million. From nothing. I was a survivor. But Jennifer had used the one weapon I wasn't armored against, the cancer card. 3 weeks ago, she had called me, her voice trembling and fragile, telling me she had been diagnosed with early-stage cancer. She had even forwarded me a spoof diagnostic report from a top-tier oncology clinic in New York. As a CEO, I usually vet everything, but the cancer card is a master key to a child's remaining hope. For a split second, I wanted to be a daughter more than I wanted to be an auditor. After 19 years of silence, I let myself believe the lie. There is a specific kind of gravity that pulls on children who were never loved, an invisible chain that keeps us tethered to the very people who broke us. We spend our adult lives building fortresses of success, yet we're still willing to dismantle them for one moment of genuine motherly affection. It's a psychological subscription we keep paying for, even when the service was canceled decades ago. I had been the silent investor in their version of family, and Aspen was supposed to be the dividend. Instead, it was an ambush. By the time I landed in Montana, the sun was a jagged line of orange over the peaks. I looked at my phone. It was flooded with messages. Tyler was asking where I was for our family breakfast. Jennifer was sending heart emojis, asking if I was okay. Their compassion felt like a luxury they had overdrafted for years, and I was finally closing the account. Walking into that airport conference room wasn't an accident. I was reclaiming the narrative. I was no longer the girl they could discard. I was the one holding the evidence, and this wasn't revenge. It was accounting. To understand why I didn't hesitate in that airport conference room, you have to understand the night I stopped being a daughter. I was 10 years old. It was a Tuesday, a night when the Montana sky was so heavy, it felt like it was pressing the breath out of the valley. In my family, love wasn't a feeling, it was a performance, and I was the only one who hadn't memorized the script. I remember the smell of cedar and the sharp tang of wood smoke in our kitchen. I had just come home with a ribbon from the school science fair, my heart pounding with the hope that, for once, Jennifer would look at me and see something of value. but Tyler had already beaten me to the stage. He had broken a silver heirloom locket that had belonged to my great-grandmother, a piece of the family legacy that Jennifer treated like a holy relic. He stood there, 11 years old, and already a master of the silent lie. Jennifer didn't yell at him. She didn't even ask what happened. She looked at the shattered silver on the floor, and then she looked at me. Her eyes were as hard as the Montana permafrost. In that moment, I saw the calculation. She needed a villain to protect her golden child, and I was the only asset she was willing to liquidate. "I know it was you, Madison," she said. Her voice was calm, which was always the most terrifying part. "You've always been jealous of your brother's place in this house." I tried to speak, to show her the ribbon in my hand, but she had already moved on to the next phase of the transaction. She reached into the hallway closet and pulled out a weathered duffel bag. She stuffed 3 of my sweaters and a pair of jeans into it. The bag smelled of cedar chips and old, damp earth, the scent of a life being packed away in a hurry. "You're leaving tonight," she told me. No suitcase, no coat, no explanation for the father who wasn't there to stop it. She opened the front door, and the Montana rain hit me like a physical blow. She handed me the bag and told me to go to my grandfather George's place, 5 miles down the dirt road. "Don't come back," she whispered. I walked. My sneakers were soaked through within the first mile, and the strap of the duffel bag dug into my shoulder like a debt I would never be able to pay off. I was 10 years old, carrying my entire existence in a bag that was older than I was, watching the lights of my own home vanish in the mist. My mother was a master of the clean break. She didn't just kick me out, she erased the ledger. For 19 years, I was a ghost in their story, a liability they had successfully offloaded onto a man who lived at the end of a gravel driveway. Standing on George's porch that night, shivering and covered in mud, I realized that in the business of the Farrell family, I was a phase, not a future. I was the silent investor in a bankruptcy I didn't deserve. Grandpa George didn't ask questions when he found me on his porch. He didn't call Jennifer to negotiate. He just took the duffel bag, handed me a warm blanket, and told me that the rain eventually stops. He was the one who taught me that when someone shows you they don't value your presence, you should believe them the first time. It took me 19 years to realize that Jennifer hadn't changed. She just wanted to buy back the stock she had dumped when I was 10, now that it was worth millions. I sat in Donald's office, the atmosphere heavy with the scent of leather and the kind of hard-earned integrity my mother had long ago traded for a polished facade. Donald had been my grandfather George's lawyer for 30 years, the silent guardian of a legacy Jennifer was desperate to liquidate. He didn't offer me tea or platitudes. He simply handed me a manila folder that felt like a death warrant for my family's version of the truth. "She's been busy, Madison," he said quietly. I looked at the first page. Jennifer had exploited an abandonment clause in Grandpa George's original trust, claiming that since I hadn't stepped foot on the ranch in 19 years, she, as the interim trustee, had the legal right to liquidate non-essential assets for maintenance. She used that loophole to sell the water rights to cover Tyler's gambling debts. She used it to secretly sell the water rights on my inherited acreage, the absolute lifeblood of a Montana ranch, to cover Tyler's $680,000 gambling debt. My breath hitched, not out of sadness, but out of the sheer efficiency of their betrayal. I had been the silent investor in their survival, and they had been siphoning my account until the pipes ran dry. My mother had treated my future like a corporate expense account to bankroll my brother's addictions. I didn't rub my eyes or look for comfort. I knew that while my company was valued at $94 million, that was paper equity locked in VC commitments. But this trust, the $5,600,000, was liquid cash. To Jennifer and Tyler, it was the only real money they could touch, and they were willing to kill to get it. "Freeze it," I said. My voice was a flat line. I signed the paperwork with a surgical precision, each stroke of the pen a brick in the wall I was building between us. Within minutes, the silence of the office was broken by the frantic vibration of my phone. A text from Tyler. The card declined at the pro shop. "Fix it now, Madison." Then Jennifer, 2 minutes later, Madison, why can't I access the house fund? This is embarrassing. We're in the middle of a transaction. Call me immediately. I didn't answer. I didn't even unlock the screen. I watched the messages pile up like bad debts on a failing company's ledger. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. They weren't panicking because they missed me. They were panicking because the cash cow had finally left the barn. Inside the office, the screen of my phone glowed with a cold, piercing clarity, a spotlight cutting through 19 years of carefully constructed lies. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a professional liquidation. I looked at the woman sitting across from Donald, Rachel Dunn. She didn't look like a private investigator from a movie. She looked like a high-level corporate security consultant. Calm, factual. She didn't waste time on empathy or, I'm sorry, you have to see this. She simply opened her laptop and turned it toward me. I found Plan B. Madison, she said. Her voice was as clinical as a surgical report. The screen displayed a series of intercepted text messages between my brother and a man with a criminal record for extortion. The words were as cold as the Aspen snow. Tyler had written, "The Aspen asset is becoming too expensive to maintain. We need to initiate the liquidation protocol on the slopes tomorrow. Ensure there are no survivors in the audit." My stomach didn't drop this time. I didn't feel the familiar panic of the little girl in the duffel bag. Instead, I felt a strange, metallic clarity. They weren't just trying to bankrupt me anymore. They were trying to delete the person who held the deed to the trust. They knew my living will left my $94 million empire to charity. Their only window was to make me disappear before I could formally secure the family trust, the only pot of gold they could still hope to steal through probate. But then Rachel scrolled down to the message that officially terminated our contract of blood. It was Tyler to Jennifer, time-stamped 2 days before our trip. Madison is refusing to yield the trust. I am going to have Victor close the account. It will look like a tragic fall. Jennifer's response was 8 words that turned my remaining childhood memories into ash. Do what you have to do. Just keep me out of it. My own mother. She didn't try to stop him. She didn't bargain for my life or suggest a different way to get the money. She just wanted her hands clean while she inherited the results of my hard work. I looked at the date on that message. She had sent it right after we took those happy family photos on the balcony. While I was standing there with my arm around her, letting her tell strangers that I was her stubborn daughter, she was approving my death warrant. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years, but this was a total default on humanity. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why she didn't love me, or what I had done to deserve a mother who valued a vacation fund over my pulse. I just turned to Donald and the police officers waiting by the door. "Proceed," I said. My voice was steady. A perfect flat line. I want the full weight of the law on both of them. I realized then that being a feral had never been a relationship. It had been a hostile takeover. For 19 years, I had been the silent investor in their version of family, footing the bill for their cruelty with my silence. But the audit was finally here. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one holding the evidence, and I was finally the majority shareholder of my own life. Inside my mind, the old world of family loyalty was collapsing, replaced by a different kind of sunrise, one made of facts, numbers, and quiet clinical retribution. I didn't wait for them to call me again. I knew exactly where they would go when the money stopped flowing. Like vultures returning to a carcass they thought was still theirs, Jennifer and Tyler pulled up to the gates of my Montana ranch. They didn't know I was standing at the window, watching them through the lens of a new reality. Tyler looked disheveled, the linen shirt from Aspen now wrinkled and stained, while Jennifer clutched her designer purse like it could still buy her a way out of the truth. The Montana air was sharp, smelling of pine and the coming winter, a stark contrast to the hibiscus-scented trap they'd set in Aspen. When I walked out onto the porch, I didn't look like the 10-year-old girl they once abandoned. I carried myself with the authority of a woman who owned every square inch of the ground beneath her feet. Jennifer immediately launched into her performance. Her eyes were red, her voice cracking with a practiced desperation. "Madison, thank God you're safe. We were so worried. Your brother made some terrible mistakes with the accounts, but we can fix this. We're family. Just sign the papers and we can go back to how things were." Tyler stepped forward, trying to summon his old authority, but it was a currency that no longer held value. "Stop being dramatic, Madison," he snapped. "We helped you get this place. You owe us. Now unlock the accounts before this gets ugly." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at them, really looked at them. They weren't shocked by what they'd done. They were only shocked that I'd stopped playing along. "This isn't about the accounts, Tyler," I said. My voice was calm, factual, and lethal. I stepped down the stairs and tossed a thick manila folder onto the hood of their car. "I didn't just call the local cops, Tyler. I spent the morning with the district attorney. They've been building the wire fraud case since I landed. This folder, it's just a courtesy copy of the arrest warrants they're about to serve." Jennifer's face went the color of the Montana snow. Tyler reached for the folder, but his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't even open the latch. "I have the recordings, Tyler. I have the messages where you discussed my accident in the mountains. And I have the message where you, Jennifer, told him to do whatever he had to do as long as you were kept out of it." The performance died instantly. Jennifer fell to her knees in the dirt, not out of remorse, but out of the sheer weight of her own failure. This was the moment the predator realizes they've lost their leverage. They were a perfect example of the illusion of power from an empty wallet. For years, they had defined their worth by the material things they could take from me. They believed their status and their cruelty made them powerful, but it was a subscription they had never actually paid for. Without my money to foot the bill, their authority was just a hollow echo. They had built their version of family on a foundation of entitlement, and now that the foundation was gone, they had nothing left to stand on. As the unmarked police cars pulled into the driveway, Tyler tried to run, but he didn't even reach the fence. The sound of the handcuffs clicking was the final entry in the Farrell family ledger. I watched the officers lead him away while Jennifer sobbed on the ground, her designer clothes covered in the very Montana mud she had always despised. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel a need for an apology. I just felt a profound sense of closure. The audit was complete, and for the first time in 19 years, the balance was zero. I was no longer an investment. I was the sole owner of my future. The $5,600,000 from the trust didn't just buy back the water rights or fix the fences of the ranch. It bought a future that Jennifer and Tyler could never touch. I spent the better part of a year restoring this land, making it into a place where cruelty would never take root. I established the Ashford Nest, a transitional home for kids aging out of the system and children who, like me, had been thrown out with nothing but a duffel bag and a broken spirit. It wasn't about being charitable or making myself look good in a magazine. It was about opening a door that had been slammed in my face 19 years ago. The ranch is never quiet now. There is the sound of laughter in the kitchen, the smell of fresh bread, and the sight of young people realizing for the first time that they are safe. I kept Grandpa George's old desk in the study. On it sits the photograph of my grandmother and me when I was 5 years old, with her careful pencil marks on the back. "You were always enough." It took me nearly 3 decades to believe those words, but now they are the bedrock of everything I build. Exactly 1 year after the trial, Donald called me into his office to deliver one final envelope. It was a letter from Grandpa George, written in his unsteady but deliberate handwriting. He wrote, "Dear little bird, I'm sorry I couldn't fight louder while I was here, but I hope you know that every day you lived on your own, you proved that love isn't about blood. It's about choice. I chose you every single day." I folded that letter and placed it against my chest, feeling a warmth that no amount of Montana snow could ever chill. My mother and brother are ghosts now, existing in a world of their own making, while I am surrounded by the family I chose, the people who show up, the people who stay. I've come to realize that we spend so much of our lives waiting for an apology that will never come, or trying to earn a seat at a table where we were never truly welcome. If you find yourself in a similar situation, standing in the rain while the people who are supposed to love you watch from the dry side of the glass, remember this. You do not owe loyalty to people who confuse control with love. You do not owe forgiveness on someone else's timeline, and you absolutely do not owe your silence to protect the people who wouldn't protect you. Building a life they didn't plan for you is not an act of betrayal.